What I propose is to start in 2015 with the murder of Boris Nemtsov. Clearly, the initial assumption was that this man was an enemy of Putin and was murdered by the regime. That was wrong, as it turns out. As we now know, the forensic evidence is pretty much clear that it was one of the former heads of Ramzan Kadyrov, the president of Chechenya's security detail, who'd done it. It seems to have been related to various insulting comments that Nemtsov had made about people close to Kadyrov. Now, what does that mean? It's scary already when the state kills people on the streets of Moscow. It's much more scary when it's not the state. There was plenty of political violence in the early Putin era. If you take the murders of Anna Politkovskaya in 2006, the crusading Novaya Gazeta journalist, actually an old friend of mine, who was gunned down outside her apartment, Chechnya. Alexander Litvinenko, the former FSB defector, poisoned in London. But the point is that all of these political murders were essentially had a clear-cut narrative. They were more or less, FSB defector, traitor, poisoned, murdered. Now, what happens in the case of Oleg Kashin, who I remember in 2010, a crusading Communist journalist, was bludgeoned outside his apartment. He was whacked by persons unknown, not by the state. Let's scroll forward just the last 6 months. Yulia Latynina having been doused in feces outside her house. In July, her house being filled with gas. In August, her car being set on fire in August. And in September, she announced that she's leaving the country. You will have heard about the controversy around Matilda. This story that has the Orthodox believers terribly riled. And in fact, so riled that some of the Orthodox believers, the self-appointed arbiters of morality, have formed themselves into an outfit calling itself the Christian state. You have these self-appointed arbiters of a greater Russian morality and spirit threatening violence completely outside the parameters of the state. We always have to be careful about correlation and causality, but I think in this case it's pretty clear that a escalation of public aggression in the media clearly has a causal link to the scandals and the acts of violence such as Matilda and the acts of violence against journalism. But I have been to Donbass in 2014. I've seen what revolution looks like in post-Soviet territory. It's absolutely bloody terrifying. You have, especially having read Tefi, having read Bulgakov, having read all the writers who wrote about what happened in Ukraine in 1919, 1920, it just all happened again in Donbass in 2014. So I'm not suggesting this is what's going to happen necessarily to Russia, but it's definitely a terrifying vision of one of Russia's possible futures, for sure, is if the centre doesn't hold. And that the centre isn't holding when it fails to actually maintain the monopoly of violence. All conversations between a foreigner and a Russian about Russia, whatever the subjects may be and the details may be, will always follow the same metric. The Westerner will argue things could be better, and the Russian will always argue things could be worse, and they're actually both completely right. Even when the next time you hear an apparently sensible, decent, kulturny person saying how much they love Putin, ask them why, and they'll say, well, without Putin, it would be we'll descend into Ukraine, which is exactly what you're talking about. Is the vertical fractionalization of the political space, where you have not just political groups, but also the media split into clans. I'll leave you just with a quote from Latynina. She says, "For almost 16 years, Putin's regime was based on lies, spread through state television and prosperity from oil money. Now the prosperity is gone and the TV audience has diminished drastically. The Ukraine conflict has lost its effect and the Syria campaign is not a good substitute. What is left is violence. When a regime starts failing, it will resort to violence for the simple reason that it is the only effective means of staying in power. A lot of friends in the political elite have expressed their horror and desire to help. Not everyone is happy with the way things stand."
Thank you very much.